Okay, so recapture does not affect district revenue. The way that school funding works is that the state of Texas, the legislature, determines what every school district's funding is going to be. If you are a district who is subject to paying recapture, that amount that you're paying doesn't reduce the amount that you are entitled to, because a school district is, by law, entitled to receive their funding every single year. The recapture that districts like Austin pays is funding that district has locally in property tax revenue above what they are entitled to. That's why it's important to have the legislature increase school districts' entitlements so that the school district has more funding and so that the recapture goes down.
Is that recapture is a system. It was created after a lawsuit, and it was created to help make sure every district in the state had fair funding. What it looked like before recapture is that districts were funded based on their local property wealth, which doesn't always correlate to the wealth of people in the community. And I grew up in San Antonio before recapture was part of our school funding system, and I grew up in an area that it was a suburb. It had pretty new schools. It had enough property wealth that we had, new books and all the things we needed, but we would go to competitions, we would go to meets in other parts of San Antonio and other districts, and there would be buildings with no air conditioning, buildings with fields that were pitted or desks that were falling apart, and they didn't have those same resources. And so recapture was intended to make sure every school had adequate funding. What has happened instead is that we've gotten to a place where no school in Texas has enough, because the state determines how much per student funding we have in our public schools, and they've chosen to fund us in the bottom 10 in the state, bottom 10 states nationally.
Technically speaking, recapture doesn't affect any school district funding. All recapture revenue goes back to the state, and then the state uses that revenue in order to fund the whole school system statewide. And so as recapture goes up or as recapture goes down statewide, it really doesn't affect school district funding, because what affects school district funding is the entitlement that the state sets regardless of whether there's a lot of recapture or none.